Hello and welcome to The Critique. Today we're looking at a video analysis on why Gen Z feels so demotivated by traditional work. It's a really sharp piece, so let's just dive right in on how to make it even more impactful.
I agree. The material is strong. I mean, the testimonials they gathered are fantastic. You can really feel the corporate dread on one side and, the grind of minimum wage on the other.
Right, and I think that's actually the perfect place to start. The material makes this really crucial observation about the different forms of work, the office job versus, say, manual labor, but it kind of misses a chance to use that distinction to build two separate, much more powerful arguments.
That's it, exactly. It's a structural opportunity. Because, it correctly points out that a lot of the online complaints, the really articulate ones, are from people in these cushy corporate jobs.
Yeah, the I don't want to do computer crowd.
Exactly. The existential dread. But then, in the same breath, it's talking about the retail worker who's facing, actual economic hardship. The weakness is that it treats their motivations or demotivations as basically interchangeable.
And they're not. They're just not. One is an existential crisis. The other is an economic one.
Absolutely. And when you try to diagnose a problem that applies to a six-figure salary worker who feels no meaning, and also a minimum wage worker who can't find stability, your conclusion just gets
fuzzy.
It gets too broad. It doesn't land as hard for either person.
Right. So the suggestion here is to restructure the whole analysis around that split, to separate the two root causes of dissatisfaction based on the type of job.
So you get conclusions that actually resonate because each listener feels like you're talking directly about their specific problem.
You're giving each type of pain its proper name. You're not lumping it all together.
So to make that really concrete, what would that look like?
Well, you could frame the whole thing as two distinct parallel crises. First, you have what you could call the existential crisis of automation and meaning.
Okay, so that's for the office work, the one who dreads the bureaucratic filler and is, rightly terrified of AI making their job obsolete.
Precisely. Their suffering is about a lack of purpose, even if they're financially stable for now.
And the other one?
The other one is the unrewarded labor crisis. This is for the retail worker, the hospitality worker, anyone doing hard, essential work that just doesn't pay enough for a stable life.
The person who can't afford an apartment or car, even working full-time.
Yep. Their problem isn't a search for meaning. It's a search for a basic economic reward for their effort. It's a broken promise.
And splitting it that way, you get a much more robust, a non-monolithic view of why Gen Z doesn't want to work.
It strengthens the entire argument. It shows it isn't laziness, it's a systemic failure that just looks different depending on where you are in the system.
Right. The corporate worker is asking, what's the point? And the retail worker is asking, why isn't this enough?
Exactly. It stops people from just dismissing it as, entitled kids complain. It forces them to see the nuance.
Okay, that's a fantastic point, and it actually leads really smoothly into the second area for improvement, which is, it's about the tone.
Yeah, the tonal consistency. I know exactly what you mean.
The piece does such a great job setting up the context. The economic hopelessness, the post-2020 awareness of mortality. It all leads to this desire to just rest, to lay in the grass and pick flowers.
It builds this incredibly empathetic foundation. You completely understand why someone would feel that way.
And then, right at the end, it just dismisses that aspiration as completely delusional. It's jarring. It breaks that investigative tone you've been building.
It's total whiplash. You spend all this time explaining the systemic pressure, the figurative jail cell, as one person called it.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the logical, emotional response, which is this fantasy of escape, the writer suddenly steps back and passes judgment.
It undercuts everything that came before it. It makes the writer sound less like an analyst and more like, scolding parent.
Right. That's completely unrealistic. It just shuts down the conversation.
So the suggestion is pretty straightforward, I think.
It is. Just remove the judgmental language. Entirely. Instead of dismissing the fantasy, analyze. Treat that yearning for a carefree life as a diagnostic symptom of extreme stress.
Yeah, the focus should be on why the fantasy is so potent, not whether it's achievable. If you're in a jail cell, you don't fantasize about a slightly bigger cell. You fantasize about being free.
That's a perfect way to put it. So, for a concrete example, instead of saying the aspiration to just skip in fields is completely delusional,
you could rephrase it. Something like, the intense, almost impractical desire for endless leisure just shows how profound the deficit of meaning and balance really is for young workers.
Yes, or It highlights how our economic reality has made basic rest feel like an impossible luxury.
That's so much more powerful. It keeps the focus on the system that created the daydream, not on the person having it.
It validates the feeling while still acknowledging its extremity. It's a rational response to an irrational situation.
Which, again, reinforces the core thesis of the entire piece. It's not entitlement, it's a reaction.
Exactly. And, that idea of a rational reaction is a perfect bridge to the final point, the part about the pandemic.
Oh, that was such a strong section. The insight that for some people, the pandemic actually motivated them to pursue risky but meaningful careers.
Because the whole idea of a safe route was just completely exposed as a myth.
Yes, it's such a powerful counterargument to the whole lazy stereotype, but it needs to be brought forward. It needs to be central to the whole discussion of job security.
Right now, it feels like an afterthought. It comes so late in the analysis. You have this incredible point where people realize the safe jobs their parents wanted for them weren't secure at all. They saw mass layoff.
And for some, losing a job they hated was freeing. It gave them permission to finally pursue what they actually wanted.
That is a massive insight. That's a whole new risk calculation. But because it's buried at the end, it doesn't get to do the work it needs to do on the main thesis.
It feels like the piece spends too much time on the problem, demotivation, before it gets to its most sophisticated answer.
So the suggestion is to elevate that finding. Make it a core part of the argument. Argue that Gen Z isn't unwilling to work. They're just applying a much more risk-adjusted calculation to what work means.
They're prioritizing meaning and control over this illusion of corporate stability that crumbled right in front of them.
Yes, it's a structural change. Bring that counter-narrative right to the front. Use it to reframe the entire conversation, away from apathy and towards strategy.
So how would you phrase that?
Well, you could link the pandemic and AI insecurity directly to this myth of low ambition. Something like, it's not that this generation lacks ambition, it's that they've radically redefined what security even means.
I like that.
If they risk losing everything in a stable job they hate, they'd rather risk losing everything in a pursuit they genuinely value. That isn't laziness. That is a highly logical calculation for a volatile world.
That framing completely changes the narrative. It turns what looked like apathy into strategic foresight.
And then you can use the AI point, the fear of being automated out of a job, to pivot. The new form of job security isn't doing the repetitive tasks. It's pursuing the deeply human, creative, passion-driven work that a machine can't replicate.
Right. That's the only viable long-term investment.
And making that shift takes the piece from just diagnosing a problem to articulating a proactive, forward-thinking strategy. It's not just, here's why we're unhappy. It's here's why our response is actually the smart move.
That's a much more powerful place to end. Okay, so just to summarize the actionable takeaways here, we've got 3 key points.
Right. First, the big structural change. Restructure the entire piece around those 2 distinct crises, the existential crisis of the corporate worker and the economic crisis of the essential worker.
Adds much needed nuance. Then, second, the tonal adjustment. Keep it consistently empathetic. Analyze those escape fantasies as symptoms of systemic burnout, not as, personal failures.
And third, the strategic shift. Elevate that pandemic insight. Foreground the pursue what you love argument as a calculated, modern approach to job security, not a lazy one.
I think putting those adjustments into place would really strengthen this material. It would take it from a very good summary of a problem to a really authoritative statement on the future of work.
It really would. We'd love to see the next iteration.
Absolutely. We encourage you to integrate this feedback and please resubmit the improved work for a future critique. Thank you for listening.